Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton at Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south, in the land of the free and the home of the brave, on a beautiful August the 17th, 2020. Rondo Deportes, bonjour, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, we got professional sports starting in earnest. We got collegiate sports starting to pump their brakes on several of their conferences. And I want to thank the frontline healthcare workers, the nurses, doctors, first responders. Show everybody the right way to act in America. Be safe, stay strong.
Be safe and stay strong. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars. Also, all around the world, just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear Welcome to the Show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing from 3,000 miles away. And I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Spotify. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Apple TV, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. But you better have a smart TV, or you'll be sitting there looking at us to a picture. Man, I love doing the pause. And I understand pausing is good, but I will never pause on our Veterans Crisis Hotline. They are experienced helping veterans and their loved ones get help. Big C, why is that so important to you?
Well, Charlton, it's so important for every American. You know, as we think about these political conventions getting underway, one of the things they need to address in their political conventions, Charlton, is how they're going to expediently help the veterans in this country.
Yeah.
We lose 22 a day to suicide, an horrific number, Charlton. But as all the squabbling politically has been going on in America, Charlton, I haven't heard any politician address the issue of our great veterans. I know we give out the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, Charlton. Our politicians need to show America how they're going out there to help prevent suicide in America. I know the pandemic is running rampant, but these veterans have been committing suicide long before this pandemic came along, and they should not be forgotten about.
They should not be forgotten, and you can call 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255, or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255, and get some help. If you're online, simply go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net, and you can get to some help. Also, very happy to be affiliated with Valley Homes Weekly TV on Dish TV, DirecTV, AT&T Uverse, TV 53, home of the San Francisco Giants. And the Say Hey Kid, when you reach out to them, just tell them Big C sent you. The goal is simple: recruit 100 real estate brokers, put their property listings on TV, just like McDonald's does it. Car dealerships do it, sports teams are doing it, and you can watch TV and real estate work for you. 800-772-8624. That's 800-772-8624. For those of you looking for opportunities in real estate, go to bigcsports.pacwm.com. That's bigcsports.pacwm.com, and you can see about opportunities there. Also, very happy to be a part of that. Big C, it's been so hot in California. Last night, my son had me working out in the garage at about 12 o'clock. I didn't get to bed until about 1 o'clock in the morning. And then I really couldn't sleep because we had thunder and lightning storms. And the temperature almost 100 degrees at nighttime in Northern California. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that's welcome to every day in the South, Charlton. We get thunder and lightning, the rain, the humidity. We're always in the 90s and in the high 80s in humidity.
Yeah. I understand why you make your own libations, Big C. Sometimes it's too hot to drive. It's too hot to drive down to the store, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, it is too hot to do a lot of things around here during the day. You go outside, the humidity from the wetness in the grass that's all around
Yeah.
as you sweating before you get to your car.
Yeah, it really does. So I know we do a lot of PSAs, but I really, in the Bay Area, a lot of the houses in San Francisco, they don't have air conditioning. And whenever you have temperatures in the Bay Area over in San Francisco that hitting almost 90 degrees, and there's no air conditioning, people count on the Pacific breeze coming in from the Pacific Ocean. I just hope a lot of people stay safe. Please check on your elderly parents. Sometimes they may have an AC, but if the AC doesn't work, oftentimes a parent will say, "Oh, I'm fine, baby," and you go in the house and it's 90 degrees. So make sure you check on your parents. They're saying even down in Death Valley, Big C, there's a reason they call it Death Valley. Hardly anything can live in that kind of heat. 130 degrees is the highest temperature ever recorded for that part of Southern California between East LA and also Las Vegas, Nevada. So please take a heed of that, Big C. I also want to jump to the NFL. The Washington Football Club, this is a season of change. It really is, Big C. And the Washington Football Club, they've made NFL history. Washington hired, and think about it, Jason Wright as their team president, making him the first black team president in NFL history and only the fourth former player in the United States in that role, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you think about the history of this Washington Football Club, Charlton. They were the last team in the NFL to hire an African American. And so to be the first team in the NFL to hire an African American as the president organization, you think about the changes that we've gone through in the past year or so in America as far as racial understanding and appreciation, knowing that people that are qualified should get the job. And when you look at Jason Wright, Charlton, you hire a qualified person. You don't hire a person just because of color. So he had the qualifications to be president of this Washington Football Club. Being a former player in the NFL, playing some 7-8 years in the NFL as a running back, a graduate of Northwestern University, Charlton.
Yeah.
He has the mental tools to operate. And that's how we got to start looking at black people in America, is that they have the mental tools, forget the physical tools, but the mental tools to run organizations and be in leadership positions.
Yeah, but I disagree with something you said. You said, even Dr. King said, don't judge people. He said, judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And I would say 90% of the white guys, they get hired because Joe knows Bob, Bob knows Dave, and Dave knows Bill, who knows Steve. They don't get it based on their qualifications. There's so many guys that, like the guy that just got the job down for the Dallas Cowboys, Coach McCarthy. He had a phone call, and he went and stayed the night in Jerry Jones' house, even though it's a coach instead of a president. And that's how most white guys that I've known in any industry have gotten jobs, private sector or not. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that's white history, Charlton. That's being in the dominant position to be able to hire and fire people. This is nothing new. It's always been there. The guy that he replaced, Bruce Allen.
Yeah.
Not many people understand Bruce Allen's history. But Bruce Allen got the job because his dad was the first coach of the Washington Redskins to take the team to a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So Bruce Allen got the job because everybody knew who his dad was, and they felt that he could keep that same thing going, Charlton.
Yeah.
So he got a job on nepotism, as many white people in America get a job on nepotism, knowing people.
Yeah.
And so this is how the change wave is coming in America. When we see the march for social justice that's gained so much momentum in the past several months in America, and people understanding things. And I don't feel bad if he got the job because he was black. Because a lot of people say, well, they're just trying to make up for things. Well, whether you're making up for it or not,
yeah,
there's been a lot of black hires in the NFL. We think about the Miami Dolphins having an African-American general manager.
Yeah.
The Cleveland Browns having an African-American general manager. You have to be able to give these men the job because they are qualified.
Yep.
Don't just sit there and say, well, we like the way you talk, but we're going to go in a different direction. Don't
Yeah.
let us BS anymore.
Yeah.
In the public sector, in the sports sector,
Yeah.
anywhere. You have to give the guys the job. Give them a chance.
Yeah.
You look at how many white men fail in professional sports every year.
All the
and then
time.
they go and hire another white man
Yeah.
who fails right behind him. This is what's acceptable. As long as white guys fail, it's okay. But a black guy has to do twice as good as a white guy when he gets a job in sports.
Yeah, if people look at that, I've had friends, and man, it takes me back to college where people would say they don't believe and affirmative actions, and I asked them, what was the Middle Passage about? What was Jim Crow about? Was that affirmative action? What was the Voting Rights Act? Was that affirmative action for white people? They've already had everything, and their friends get friends jobs. And I even had recently, a friend of mine went to Cal Berkeley, and we'd had conversations years back about he didn't believe in affirmative action. I asked him how he got a job, and he said a friend. So it's all fair level war. Right, think about it, Big C. He played in the NFL for 7 years, replaced longtime president, Bruce Allen, as you mentioned before, who was fired after the 2019 season and immediately set with the organization. I think about when we juxtapose a job in the front office as opposed to on the playing surface. These front office jobs, you don't have to compete. You just got to know the right person. If you're going to get a job as an athlete, you got to be really good in college, and then you're going to get scouted at the combines, and then teams are going to bid on you. If you're lucky enough to get drafted, then you'll get the job. But you got to go through a lot of other players that are trying out for your position. And our white friends know, at least the honest guys, they know. They just get a phone call from a friend. I mean, it's always been that way. It's just you got to be at the table to have a chance to eat the food, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you always have to be at the table. You need that opportunity. And when you're devoid of that opportunity, as many black coaches and general managers positions and president positions have come and gone over the years in the NFL, and then they have to implement this little BS rule called the Rooney Rule.
Yeah.
That really doesn't work. It's been in play for decades. It goes back to who would have ever thought that you'd have seen two black coaches opposing each other in the Super Bowl when Tony Dungy and Lovie Smith opposed each other in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You should have realized at that point that the thing should have changed drastically around the NFL, that black coaches deserve more opportunities because you had these two combatants competing in the Super Bowl, the biggest stage in the NFL.
Yeah.
And for people to sit around and say, well, we don't want to see that. And that was the toughest part of that Super Bowl, Charlton, is that people did not want to see two black head coaches. As much of a history-making moment it was, this was a spotlight that was reserved for white coaches.
Yeah.
They should have been there. But you had two black men showing that they were better than all 30 other coaches in the NFL, and that didn't set well because it did not open the floodgates for hiring of black coaches in the NFL. Matter of fact, both of those coaches are no longer in the NFL. Even though Tony Dungy retired, they fired Lovie Smith, and he could not get another job after leading his team to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Look at Ron Rivera, the current coach of the Washington Football Club. He went to the Super Bowl and lost, and he's still in the NFL. Even though he's a minority, he's still in the NFL. And many other coaches that have lost Super Bowls are still there also.
Yeah, and even when you look at Tom Flores as a minority coach that won 2 Super Bowls for the Raiders, they said that's still not good enough for the Hall of Fame, Big C. It's all fair and love and war. Big C Sports, we want to be sexy. We want to be thrilling. We want to be cool. We want to be thoughtful. We want to be clever. We want to be sleek. We want to be engaging. We really want to be provocative. If you love sports talk, if it feels good to you, and you want some more, just Google it. I really appreciate what we're doing. In fact, I also want to pay homage to some of the mothership. Everybody has their own style, but we've been the same since 2015. And I know in the mothership, they've changed so many broadcasters now. They're switching guys around at different time of the day. And I mean, that's fine. People do what they want to do. But I got to tell you a story that I heard this morning. I heard of a guy, his name, a lot of people know who he is. I'm not going to give him any free advertising. He said, man, I gave one of these black guys a start because I brought him on my show a couple of years ago. And now that I have this new time slot, I wanted to bring him on as my first guest, but he hasn't called in yet. So we're going to scramble around and figure out what else to do. If they're paying you millions of dollars, why you need somebody to call in, Big C? That makes sense to you.
Well, when you look at the show, it deals a lot with plagiarism and stealing information from other people. Matter of fact, I was looking at the mothership this morning.
Yeah.
And Get Up.
Yeah.
Mike Greenberg.
Yeah.
Always admired the guy.
Yeah.
I've been using a saying, Charlton, for the past month on our show.
Yeah.
Being in the room where it happens.
Yeah.
Who's in the room where it happens? All of a sudden, I hear Mike Greenberg use it twice on the show.
Yeah.
So, Mike, I want to give you a shout-out for listening to Big C Sports.
Yeah.
Mike Greenberg from ESPN listens to Big C Sports because he uses the same mantra that I use.
Yeah.
Who's in the room where it happens?
Well, they call that discovering, if that makes sense to you. Big C's all fair level war. Speaking of discovering, I told you about the heat wave that's hidden here in Northern California. And just to piggyback on that, when I say at the end of the show, back in the day, there's a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. You notice how we give him credit? We don't just say, rumble, young man, rumble, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. We pay homage to Drew Boudini Brown. We don't steal it, but we're not white. You know, that makes sense to you, Big C. Dallas Cowboys, they cope with the heat in Frisco, Texas, because if it's hot in California, and people say it's a dry heat, but it really has felt uncomfortable. I know down in Texas, where they're still saying they want to get these college and high school players to play football, how they deal with the heat in Frisco, Texas. I don't want anyone to have any issues. I remember Corey Stringer for the Minnesota Vikings back in the day. Is it still, when it gets this hot with COVID and also the CTE and everything else, what do teams do to keep players safe, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charleston, you do all you can by hydrating. You keep the fans going on players and stuff. You monitor them, for temperature checks. You make sure they take that helmet off periodically to allow your head to cool down, Charleston. But there's really not much you can do to help players out when the heat is just unbearable out there. You have to limit practice time and how intense practice is going to be. But when it's 100 degrees, it's 100 degrees.
Yeah, 100 degrees is 100 degrees. A dry heat or a damp heat, humid heat is all hot, Big C. It's almost hot enough to just fry an egg on the street, it seems, here in Northern California. But we will get used to it. I want to go up to Rocky Mountain High, Big C, the Denver Broncos. The top draft pick, Jerry Jeudy, making good impressions over in Inglewood, Colorado. And I know everybody's going to go through their moments of seeing if a player is good enough, if they really get what they want. But this is just practice, Big C. But I think the guys that come out of a passing system, people don't think of Alabama as being a passing system. But when you look at, they've had Tua and also Jalen Hurts over their last two quarterbacks, both led them to championship games, and both were very good at throwing the ball. Alabama's known as a running team, but they really are a passing team, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Alabama over its history, Charleston, has had a legacy of number one draft pick at wide receiver. You go back to Julio Jones, you go with the kids that the Raiders drafted that sent to the Cowboys a couple of years ago, and Jeudy and a couple others that have come out of that, Calvin Ridley.
Yeah.
There's been many number one draft picks that have come out of Alabama. People always looked at this university as a running school. But, when you go out and you find an athlete that can play a position, it doesn't matter which school they come out of. You look at Cortland Sutherland.
Yeah.
On the other side of the ball, come out of Cal Poly, the Division II school out there in California.
Yeah.
So it's not about where a player plays. It's can he play. When you look at some of the greatest receivers in NFL history, Charleston, they didn't come out of the Power 5 conference.
No.
You look at Randy Moss, Art Monk, these guys, Terrell Owens. As long as the guy can go out there and get the job done, Charleston, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
Can he play football?
Yeah. Can you play, Big C? I want to think about can you play. I'm proud of this guy, but he's a grown man. You can't do anything if you're afraid in life anyway, but stay home. But Washington quarterback Alex Smith, really proud of him, Big C. This kid came out of Helix High School in San Diego area, La Mesa, California. He was a quarterback for Reggie Bush when they won a San Diego section championship game. Went to the University of Utah. They actually had an undefeated season. We know he played for the 49ers, ultimately replaced by Colin Kaepernick, Big C. And he attended practice for the first time in a year and a half. Remember, he had leg surgeries and all other issues that he's had in his career as a football player. But I know you got to be tough if you're going to play this game. It's amazing. He's had more surgeries for anyone that decided to come back, it seems, as opposed to retiring, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when I think of Alex Smith, I think of Clint Eastwood. He had a movie called True Grit.
Yeah.
Years ago, Charlton, and that's what I get with Alex Smith, True Grit.
Yeah.
Here's a guy who could have lost his life, could have lost his leg, all of these things. But he hung in there, Charlton. There was no give up in Alex Smith. And now being cleared by the medical staff in Washington practice, he went out yesterday for the first time in 21 months and practiced with the Washington Redskins, Charlton.
Yeah.
So you think about just being an inspirational story alone to this Washington football club that Alex Smith is back out there. Players play with all types of ailments and aches all the time, Charlton, minor injuries. But when you look at what Alex Smith has gone through in his life and his perseverance over the past several months, Charlton, with all these multiple leg surgeries. 17. No player in NFL history has had 17 surgeries on a leg and ever played again. Alex Smith is trying to make history in many ways. And if you think about the two quarterbacks that have replaced Alex Smith in former teams, the San Francisco 49ers, Colin Kaepernick ended up in the Super Bowl. Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes ended up in the Super Bowl. And now Alex Smith is back to give it another fight, Dalton. And you think about the Washington Football Club. When he went down with that gruesome, horrific leg injury, they were 6-3 at that point in the season.
Yeah.
And so there was a reason that he's coming back, because he demonstrates pure and true leadership. And if he can come back, and I'm pulling for Alex to win the starting job in Washington.
Yeah.
I mean, they struggled, but if he can come back and win the starting job, I can't see a player on that roster giving less than 100% every play.
I would love to see Alex Smith get the starting job. Not knocking anybody else who's there. Everybody, you got to earn it. But if it just, to me, more than anything, it's one thing that he has the mental makeup to do it. But what medical science can achieve now compared to when guys tore an I think it was Joe Theismann that had a similar injury, not as horrific in the recovery process, but in his injury ended his career. In fact, Joe Theismann, if you ever see him, he walks with a limp. One leg is longer than the other when he had a similar type injury. But it's something about medical science. And so I just wish Alex Smith the very best. I also want to stick to the East Coast in that same area, Big C. The Baltimore Ravens, they're taking a look at wide receiver Dez Bryant. I remember when he was down in Dallas, the Jerry Jones Club, and he had an injury to his lower extremity, his foot, I believe, and he lost a little bit of a step. I think he's 31 years old, so he's not going to have the same kind of speed, but he did have a mentality that would make him stronger, or at least more determined. And there's something about when you lose something and you get that second chance. I think Dez Bryant, if he can come and make the team, he'll be a good short possession receiver. Big C, your thoughts?
I don't think he has a chance to make the team, Charlton. If you go back to 2018, he tore his Achilles when the New Orleans Saints signed him. This has been 2 more years out of football. You got to think about all the great receivers that have come into the league since Dez Bryant was an active player.
Yeah.
And if Dez Bryant was that good a player that should have been on an NFL roster, he would have been unemployed for the last 4 years.
It bounced around. When I remember Terrell Owens, when he was like, these guys got to understand, especially the college kids, and the quarterback out of Ohio State, he's trying to gather signatures so people can say, we want to play football. But I hope he understands what you're saying now. Number one, you're not going to make any money playing for Ohio State other than what they give you under the table, and that's not anything to write home about compared to what the NFL will give you. But I remember when Terrell Owens was being bounced around trying to make a team. Here's a guy that's a multiple-time All-Star, Big C. I remember even Jerry Rice, when he was being bounced around, trying to find a final place to just see if he could still have something left in the tank. And when you have a guy like Bryant, for these young college kids that say, I want to play, you better save your energy and the hits you're going to take for the NFL, because even some of these great guys who've been all-pro players, they get to a point where they're told, you don't have it, Big C. You don't have it. That's why it's so important for college players to wait. Don't beg to play for free. Look at these guys who are trying to beg for an opportunity to get back in the game for one more dance, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Justin Fields has gone out and got over 230,000 signatures on a form, Charlton, to demand that Ohio State reinstate football. They're not going to do it, Charlton. These guys understand the science. They understand the financial liability if a player gets ill and even loses his life. When I think about veteran players, Charlton, stumbling around, wanting to get on a roster, I mean, there's always a needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
But there's a reason why they have a draft every year.
Yeah.
Because 230 players are going to get a job, 230 players are going to lose a job. And when you're one of those players who lose a job, the reason for that is that the other people that are younger and cheaper are better than you.
Yeah.
You got to look at Dez Bryant, who's been hawking around, going to tryouts all over the place, trying to get a job. I would take Terrell Owens before I took Dez Bryant. I would take Antonio Brown before I took Dez Bryant. And there's a handful of other former veteran receivers out there, Charlton, that would outperform Dez Bryant. Dez Bryant is a name that people know.
Yeah.
But you got to understand, personnel people in the NFL know that he cannot play.
Yeah. Well, they know that he can't play, but I'm still surprised. Did you say, and maybe I didn't hear you right, did you say you would take Terrell Owens and still give him a chance, Big C? Your thoughts?
I would take him in front of Dez Bryant in a heartbeat.
Okay.
Terrell Owens still today at 46 years old can run a 4.5 40.
Wow.
At 46 years of age, and he's still chiseled.
Yeah.
And he's a big dominating person, Charlton. So he can intimidate defensive backs and physically abuse them.
You know, it's interesting when you think, did you say 4.5 40? My goodness, I remember when I first met Terrell Owens, he was in the locker room at a 49er game, and he was just starting to replace Jerry Rice. In fact, Chris Tucker was in the locker room, too. I remember watching Rush Hour just over the weekend with my son. But I remember Terrell, he was in a light green suit, and the guy looked skinny. And he put on so much muscle from that time. And Big C, that was going back 20 years ago. And the fact that you would still give him a shot in the NFL, that says a lot to how hard he's worked out.
Terrell Owens worked out with Tyreek Hill over the offseason.
Really?
Tyreek Hill beat Terrell Owens in a 40-yard dash by a stride and a half. Think about that. He's probably the fastest man in the NFL.
Yeah.
He beat Terrell Owens in a 40-yard dash by a stride and a half.
Wow. I mean, when you look at guys that can't run as fast as he is and they're in their 20s, you would think the man could get a chance. It's all about timing. And speaking of timing, I love what we're doing with sports, Big C. I love what we do with so many things that are going on in the world of sports. But, man, I'd be remiss. And I just want to make this one more comment to Justin Fields. And I want your opinion, and it's just an opinion, and everybody has one. I think it's quite irony that they use, I'm not saying they use, he has a mind of his own, but the schools that often have a spokesperson that will come out and say yes or no. But young man Fields, sit with your medical doctor first, not some booster at Ohio State that's giving you a paper bag, if that makes sense to you, and talk with a medical doctor, and then discuss the condition of people in your household, in your family, like maybe some of the people who took care of you growing up, and talk to that medical doctor about the ramifications of what could happen if you bring COVID back into the house. They keep saying the African-American community is the most affected, and I think that may be because in many areas, people live on top of each other in these housing projects that's by design. But you're too smart, Justin Fields. You're too smart. You got such a bright future. You got young black men that Big C said he would still give Terrell Owens a chance. And these guys, they can't get a chance. And here you are. You have your whole life ahead of you. And you're going to let some white guys talk you into going out there and not making any money and potentially risking several people in your household. That doesn't make any sense, Big C. Your thoughts?
So why is Justin Fields even a story when it comes down to this? You know, you got coaches that recruit players, and I'm going to take care of you like my son.
Yeah.
So Ryan Day is a head coach. Shouldn't he be the daddy in the house coming out speaking?
You would think so.
Justin Fields is saying.
Yeah.
You think about this. You're college educated, and all of a sudden you got 4 or 5 kids in your house.
Yeah.
And you sit down and you clearly state to the kids what the problem is and why the actions are going to be made the way that you stated. But you got the youngest kid in the house saying, well, I don't understand, and I still want this my way.
Yeah.
They're always going to say that. This is what you get with college athletes.
Yeah.
You got college athletes running off their mouth. You got the school president. You got the head coach. You got the athletic director. Why aren't we hearing from those 3 individuals? And why are people giving Justin Fields credit for the crap that he wants to talk about? He wants to play, and he's going to go out and get a petition, and he has some 230,000 signatures
That's
on it.
dumb.
Wow, I'm impressed.
Yeah.
But when you got the main people at the university, the president of the university, athletic director of the university, head coach of the university, unanimously saying, we're not going to play.
Yeah.
So maybe you need to pack your bags and run off to the 3rd college if you want to go off.
Yeah. At least challenge your medical doctor and ask him why playing football for free is more important than staying healthy and going to the NFL where you become a multimillionaire. We'll take the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. I'm going to give you a quiz when I come back, Big C. It's about a conference down in the South in 2 schools that are located less than 100 miles away. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, we are back from the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. There's so many applications you can follow Big C Sports. We're all like on every continent, and I really appreciate that. On every continent, you can follow Big C Sports. Just say play Big C Sports Podcast. And speaking of where you can say play Big C Sports Podcast, I know your friend at ESPN that discovered you're saying he discovered it, Big C, if that makes any sense to you. College football in the SEC. University of Auburn. Listen up, Coach Justin Fields. Is it Coach Fields or Justin Fields now with the signatures? University of Auburn. They had 34 players test positive for COVID-19. They're only 95 miles away from the University of Alabama. Of those 34 players, most of them have at least one parent that they come in contact with, maybe even two. Big C, Ohio State doesn't need to get a petition to play football in COVID. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, this is what the SEC stands for, Charlton. We don't give a damn about the players. You think about the University of Auburn. We talked months ago, Charlton, about Alabama having a breakout while they were having construction on their stadium done.
Yeah.
And even when they reported to camp, Charlton, for workouts, several players had tested positive. Now, since returning back to campus, 34 Auburn players have tested positive for COVID-19. These two great universities are 95 miles away in Alabama, in Tuscaloosa, and they're in Auburn, Alabama.
Yeah.
And these universities are saying, we don't care about how many positive tests we get. We're going to force these players to go out there and play. Now, I'm constantly trying to figure out how do you practice social distancing in football. And no one has explained it to me yet. And I know I'm not that smart of an individual.
Yeah.
But I'm still wanting for somebody to explain to me how in the hell you practice social distancing in football. I know the NFL is back in practice, and today was the first day for full pads.
Yeah.
But as you have contact with each other, you don't have these face masks on. They don't have these proposed shield guards inside their helmets, Charlton.
Yeah.
What are they going to do to protect the players? Even though the NFL is testing 3 times a week with players in training camp, colleges have not set up that format. The NFL is run by a commissioner who can stipulate what's going to occur. College football is run by the next yahoo down the street.
Yeah.
What does Billy Bob think we are to do, Joe Bob? That's what college football is under right now.
Yeah.
And that's what you've seen from the leadership or lack of leadership of college football. Well, hell, they want us to come out there and play, buddy.
Yeah.
That's what you're getting from them.
Yeah. It's all fair, Love and War. I watched this show last night, and it was on BET. It was about a marriage counselor. And they had this couple. They had known each other since elementary school, and the mother, she kept the young boys away from her daughter. And as they grew up, they decided they were going to get married. So they get married, kind of a simple lifestyle, and they moved to the city of Washington, D.C. I guess they had grown up down south someplace. And so, but when she got to Washington, D.C., Big C, she met this guy that had it going on. You know how women say, ooh, girl, he got it going on. He had a red Ferrari. He had a Bentley, kind of like that Bentley you got tucked away in the garage, Big C. He had the Ferrari, he had a Bentley, he had a private jet, black dude, black couple. And so this woman, she said this country bumpkin that she grew up with, he had a pickup truck. And that red Ferrari made a lot better sound. It drove a lot faster. It was sexy. It was called what they call eye candy. And so it's just a movie, but she gets with this fancy guy, and he gave her things that the man that really loved her couldn't give her. And the mother was telling her, you got a man that loves you. He can't give you everything, but the other guy's coming along. He has you and several other women that he's that are fantasizing over him because they love that red Ferrari and that Bentley, Big C. Long story short, the man who really loved her stuck with her in the end, and the guy who was just trying to get in her pants, he got what he wanted and he was on to the next person. And it seems like a lot of colleges are doing the same thing to these men. They're dating these young boys. They want to get in your pants and get what they want for free. You get nothing out of it, and then they move on. Would that be equivalent to dating, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, college football has always been that way, Charlton. What do they rave about? The next recruiting class. How they rank in the next recruiting class.
Yeah.
They're always replacing you in college sports.
Yeah.
Well, when you look at players throughout the years, they're replaced all the time. We talked about the University of Alabama.
Yep.
Jalen Hurts, who had only lost 2 games in his whole career,
Just
was
2.
replaced by Tua.
Yeah.
And hadn't done anything wrong and stayed on the roster. So as you look at players throughout the history of college football, they're always going to be replaced. Every 2 to 3 years, there's a recycling of the lineup, Charlton, in college football completely.
Yeah.
So, if they can't get it out of you right now, what college football is worried
Yeah.
about, Charlton,
Yep.
it is next year. When you think about these conferences who have not canceled yet, but they will cancel, Charlton, come October. They will have canceled their schedule. What they're worried about, Charlton, is having an overload of players on the roster. That's what coaches don't want. They don't want a riches and wealth that would be around next year.
Yeah.
And that's what would occur. You think about all the players whose eligibility would be up, but still allowed to play, Charlton, because of the pandemic. College coaches don't want to have to deal with that shuffle of having too much riches and wealth.
Yeah. So Justin Fields, they're using you to go out and get those other young boys to put money in their bank accounts. And I'm all for you playing if Coach Day will give you his multi-million-dollar contract, and then he gets what you get, which is 3 meal tickets. And I don't know if they give you any money to spend, but 3 meal tickets and a pair of tennis shoes and a hat. Trade that with your coach who put you out there and making you look dumb as opposed to taking care of your parents. He's in a red Ferrari, Big C. I hope they understand the difference. A high school football district, not a team, but a district. Not a team, but a district, Big C, in Alabama, and a high school district in Utah. Utah has the University of BYU. They have the Utah Utes. They have the Utah State Aggies. They have a couple other programs, too. Alabama, of course, has Alabama and Auburn and University of Alabama, Birmingham. So many other programs. They've had to postpone games. Listen up, Justin Fields. Okay, you got to understand when you're being preyed on and being used by those guys who make millions of dollars every 12 months. They've had to postpone games, Big C. You know why? They test positive for COVID-19 in several players, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it would seem inevitable, Charlton. If the University of Auburn is going to have 34 players test positive, you got to understand the school district must be in some similar proximity of that university.
Yeah.
And they've had to shut down playing because here it is, all these players testing positive for COVID-19. We talked about last week the Utah where they were playing. There were 2 different conferences. They were opening up playing football last Friday night, Charlton.
Yeah.
We talked about the possibility of COVID-19 hitting those schools.
Yeah.
And here it is. I don't know which school district it is, but they've closed down. They've had to delay games, Charlton, because players are testing positive for COVID-19. So as we look at this continuously run out over time, this is going to be a continuing story every week.
Yeah.
That people are saying, well, we got to play for the kids. How the hell are you playing for the kids and they're not the ones putting the game on? You're playing for yourself.
Yeah.
You're playing not to lose revenue.
Yeah.
Be honest about it. At least be honest to the high school kids. Be honest to the college kids.
Yeah.
We're not playing the game for you. We're playing the game for revenue. Because even if we don't got butts in the stands, we got a television contract that's going to pay us money.
Yeah. That's why when I see Justin Fields and these white people they're not going to let you speak for the school without giving you permission. So they say, you know what, guys? How can we get this money? Let's get some black kid that could be a first-round NFL draft pick, and let's put him out there to try to get other kids to play. If you guys want to play, just play flag football. That's for free, too. The only difference between playing flag football and playing college football, if you're programs at Ohio State or Alabama, wherever they are wanting to play, Big C, the only difference is one is played in a uniform and the other is not, because you don't make any money with either one of them. I was telling you earlier, and I hope that the young kids all over the country will listen. The temperature at Death Valley, as I mentioned, National Park in Southern California, it was scorching 130 degrees on Sunday. And that's marking what could be the hottest temperature on Earth since at least 1913, according to the National Weather Service, Big C. And they're saying for any visitors to the park, you're going to get some advice. It says, travel prepared to survive. That means not to die. And, people listen. They heed those warnings because the National Weather Service is saying when it's 130 degrees, some people have heat stroke and they pass away, Big C. You can't see heat stroke. You can only feel the heat. A lot like COVID-19. The scientists and the smart people are saying, don't play in it, don't be a part of it, and you'll find that there'll be some white coaches, just like in the days of slavery and Jim Crow. They put the black men out there to go check out to see the alligators if they could get alligators. They used to bait for alligators by putting black babies out in swamps, and it would try to attract the alligators. And if they can't, then they can shoot the alligators or catch them. They didn't do that to white kids. And it's amazing. They may have every now and then a white kid say, hey, like the guy down at Clemson, we want to play. But even Trevor Lawrence, you guys are both going to be first-round draft picks. But at the end of your career, who's more likely to get an NFL coaching job or even college coaching job? Would it be Fields out of Ohio State or Lawrence out of Clemson, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, ironically, these two guys played against each other in high school, and it would end up being Trevor Lawrence who would end up with a long-term career in football beyond Justin Fields. People think about him as the next great one already that has come along.
Yeah.
And so as you sit there and you look at this scenario, Charlton, saying that the black athletes have to fight to get out there to play, if you're going to be a number one draft pick in the NFL, you're already slated to be a
number big. Go ahead, Big C. We have the trouble with your microphone.
You have this little thing that comes along called the Combine in Indianapolis every year, Charlton.
Yeah.
The players will go and they will stabilize what is. And so as you see these players fighting, saying we need to come out there.
Big C, we're having a little bit of trouble with your microphone. We're going to try to clear that up. I know the weather's been pretty hot out here in California. And it's also, I know it's down south. It's really a heat wave hitting all over the country. But just again, for Justin Fields, man, be smart. Don't be like the woman in the movie that left a man that really loved her for a guy that had all the fancy bells and whistles. But she had to share him with the other 37 women that were also infatuated with the Ferrari and the Bentley and all those things. And that's what those schools do to our young black boys. They say, you can have this too. They let you drive it. They just don't let you have it. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, they'll let you test it. They won't give it to you. Your name will not be on the paper where it matters.
Yeah, it won't be on the paper. And they do it to men too. Don't think it's just women falling for the guys with the jewelry and the diamonds and the fancy cars. They do it to men too. They always want to suck on the jock straps of young black boys because it puts millions of dollars in their bank accounts. And to me, I'm appalled when I see, because I have a young black son also. And I don't want some man, in fact, I won't allow it to happen. I'm not going to allow somebody to put them out there like bait on the end of a hook to catch more fish. It's all fair and level war. So how do you keep K through 12 school districts when you think about that? And Justin Fields is begging against science to play for white guys. You want to play for free to give white guys $1 million. That's dumb. It really is. How do you keep K through 12 high school districts that think they can feed kids breakfast and lunch and do that safely, Big C? Your thoughts?
You know, that's propounded me, Charlton, ever since they've had this fight for kids to get back to school. They say they can do it safely. You know, many of these kids, Charlton, rely on their school meal, breakfast and lunch, for their major meals of the day.
Yeah.
And something I've learned, and like I said, I'm not that smart. I've learned that I can't eat with a damn face mask on, Charlton. I can't do it.
Yeah.
I cannot do it.
Yeah.
Now, I remember back in the days of being in school, and that was a long time ago, we went to the line, we had metal trays in school.
Yeah.
But we traded things off the tray, Charlton. You don't want the Jell-O, you don't want this. You know, people swap things.
Yeah.
Kids are going to do the same thing. I don't see them with any hand sanitizer as they swapping stuff between the trays, Charlton.
Yeah.
You going to finish that, or can I have what you got left over?
Yeah.
This happens in school.
Yeah.
K through 12, this happens, Charlton. So as you're sitting there in the lunchroom, K through 12, parents think your kids are not going to be safe because they're going to be basically co-mingling with everybody in that lunchroom, and the school know they can't keep everybody healthy.
Yeah.
The last time I checked in the school, Charlton, they don't have a place to wash their hands in the lunchroom. They don't have it.
No.
So when we talk about filth and being dirty, that's the lunchroom of your average school.
Yeah, we know it's going to happen. In fact, they even had outbreaks at Notre Dame. They had outbreaks at North Carolina. They haven't even played football yet. This is just kids getting together at parties, and they're not social distancing. And I guess they bought into what Donald Trump said, and a lot of these kids have already tested positive for COVID-19, and then they send them home to their parents. They send them home to their parents because the school's not going to keep them quarantined for 2 weeks, Big C. They send those kids back home to their parents, and they spread the virus that way. There's a kid down, I believe he's at LSU. He's a really good player. He's a cornerback. His name is Kerry Vincent. He opts out of the 2020 season, and I hope Justin Fields can understand this. And if you understand, the kid's opting out because he reads. he reads. He knows how to read a book. And I'm sure he has, Ed Orgeron and said, I want you boys to get out there and play because I make several $1 million when you guys go out there and risk your lives, and I give you a thank you and a pat on the back. But Ed Orgeron's not going to get out there and bring his wife and kids. You saw him with his wife and kids when they beat Clemson in the national championship game. He's not going to have them anywhere near the field. But here's a guy, Kerry Vincent, Big C, and I want your thoughts. He announced today that he's opting out of the college football season. And Justin Fields, would you believe he's going to begin training for the NFL Combine? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, that's the second starter from the defending national champion LSU Tigers to opt out for the season. And I appreciate these players and understand. You know where you sit draft stock-wise if you play or if you don't play. There's no guarantee that any player that potentially is going to play this year, Charlton, will get through the season healthy. You could end up with a leg injury, an arm injury. All of these happen to players, Charlton, throughout football season. So as these people are sitting around saying, I need these players to play,
right,
we need to get them back out on the field, be honest why you need to get them back out on the field.
Money.
Do you need them to get them back on the field for their health? Do you need them to get out on the field to potentially develop their draft stock? Or do you need them on the field so that you and the university can make some money?
Yeah.
This is what I want to hear coaches and athletic directors come out and say. This is about financial. This is not about the players needing to play. It's about us needing the money.
Yeah.
We've never had a financial shortfall like this in the history of college football, Charlton, where all of a sudden billions of dollars were at stake by players not playing.
Yeah.
And there's no way to recoup the money. And this is what universities are trying about.
Yeah.
As we got Americans that have been with 2 weeks without an unemployment check because our national government doesn't want to get together our senators and our congressmen and make a deal so that the American public can survive. They were getting $600, Charlton, that got cut off 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And now Americans are sitting around wondering how they're going to pay their bills, how they're going to feed their kids. You think they give a damn about a college football game? No, they don't. It does not take the sting off not have the finances to survive each month.
Big C, you said there's some guy at ESPN that stole your line. I guess he would say he discovered your line and he used it. What would you say his name was? Greenberg or something of that nature? Is that what you said,
Yeah,
Big C?
yeah, Mike Greenberg is talking about who's in the room where it happens. I always talk about that, who's in the room where it happens.
Yeah.
Justin Fields may have needed to be in the room where it happened when they made
Yeah.
the decision to cancel football in the Big Ten, so that he could sit there and understand the intelligence of having a college degree and not just playing football.
Yeah, and I want him to understand, because when you say who's got it better than us, it's the white coaches. You look at the SEC alone. You got Mike Leach, Mississippi State. They go on the road to face defending national champion LSU, where a smart player said, I'm not playing, I'm going to go where I get paid. They're ranked number 5 preseason and in the coaches poll. And then you have SEC coach for Arkansas, Sam Pittman. For Missouri, Eli Dierkowitz, Big C, and Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin. They're all set to debut, in the first week of the SEC season. Arkansas faces Georgia at home. Missouri is going to take on Alabama, and then Ole Miss is supposed to play Florida at home. The one thing that's common in those coaches is when they get the $1 million deposited into their checking accounts, and some of these guys, they're making between $1 million and $11 million a year. Those guys are white. And that money goes collectively in those white coaches. You're talking collectively, guys, throughout the year. In the SEC conference, I think, what are the 16 teams in the SEC, Big C? I think they have
14 teams in the SEC. The lowest paid coach in the SEC makes $4 million a year.
$4 million a year. So you're talking and that's not even including the sponsorships that they get for car dealerships and other items. Those coaches combined and their staff, that's over $100 million all combined, those 14 schools with their coaching staff and all of the other paraphernalia they get and TV advertisements, etc. Over $100 million. That's SEC alone. How much do those black players of all the 14 teams in the SEC, if you add up every African-American athlete, that's about 80% of their teams, of those 14 teams, how much money do they get, Big C? Combine your thoughts.
Well, I'm going to consider, Charlton, that they get to go into the lunchroom where it's going to be unsanitary with no face mask. And no place to wash your hands in the lunchroom, Charlton. So they're going to get 3 meals and a bed to sleep in during the season.
Yeah. So, guys, just do the math. It's no different than slavery. It's no different than slavery. There's one skin and color of people doing the work. There's another skin and color of people saying, aren't you happy? Aren't you happy? Don't you love being able to sleep on that cottage, get out there and work? And don't you love seeing me go to the bank while you get the scraps, Big C? I want to ask America to vote. Just text the word VOTE to 26797, and you can register. Text all your friends. Tell them Big C and the NFL said vote now. You got to do that. Nobody's telling you who to vote for. If you're like a man that wants to grab your daughters by the vagina and get away with it and start all the racial garbage and the vitriol, if that's what you want, you have a chance. He's on the ballot too. If you want people to bring decency to the White House, you got a choice. I'm just asking people to read. You can do whatever you want to do. I want to go up to Canada. You know, the CFL, Canadian Football League, they've been playing football longer than the NFL. And they're canceling the 2020 season. They're citing financial losses and also the fact that this pandemic, they want to get through it like people did back in 1918, and they started playing again in 1919, and they're looking at the same thing in 2020, Big C. So I know we already have the travel ban between the United States and Canada, but I think the CFL is doing the scientifically correct thing, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I'm going to consider that Prime Minister Trudeau has a lot to do in that, Charles, because when you think about the Canadian Football League, half its players are Americans that have to come back and forth across the border. And since he's put in the ban on Americans coming back and forth across the border, Charlton, and you know, when we think about football, it's not like hockey and it's not like basketball where you're playing in a bubble.
Yeah.
Football, you got all these different cities and players have to fly each week to go back and forth between each other. And as we continuously discuss, how do you keep players safe from each other's passing passages back and forth between each other, Charlton? You can't. You fly on a plane. You get off that plane. You get on a bus. You get off that bus. You go to a hotel, Charlton. So when you think about the hundreds of people that you're potentially going to be coming in contact with throughout your travels each week, there's no way to keep players safe. And I'm looking at the NFL. What is Roger Goodell going to do? I know we're a month away from playing a game and potentially playing a game in the NFL.
Yeah.
What is Roger Goodell going to do in 6 weeks, Charlton, after several players have come down with COVID-19?
He's going to go to the bank, Big C. He's going to go to the bank. The CFL joins the XFL, which was bought by The Rock and some of his investor friends, and 2 other major American college conferences, the Big Ten and the Pac-12, and canceling their 2020 season because of the pandemic. It's like the movie that I watched last night. There's a woman that had a man that really loved her and said, just work with me, we'll make anything happen that we want to have happen. But she wanted it now, Big C. Like those white coaches, they want the money now. They don't want to wait for the pandemic to subside. They don't want to wait for a vaccine or some type of treatment. They want the money now. And unlike the players, they'll put the players out there to get it. Jerry Jones is not going to play football this year. If the NFL, Jerry Jones is not going to play football, Big C. He just won't do it. Snyder's not going to play football. None of them are going to play. They're going to send their boys out there and do it, but everybody's have to do what they feel is in their best interest. I also want to just say, because I know there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel too, at least I hope, Major League Baseball, New York Yankees star, their closer, Aroldis Chapman, unless he's seen Jose Altuve, Big C, he's a really good pitcher and closer, Big C, but Jose Altuve got the best of him one time. But the Yankees are saying that he's recovered from the COVID-19 and that they say that he's ready to get out there and start helping the Yankees win. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I don't know that he's recovered. I mean, yes, he's passed the test. But, passing a test is not physical recovery, and that's how people need to start addressing it.
Yeah.
Just because you tested positive, physically you have not recovered. So those are 2 different scenarios. Saying that somebody has recovered, no, they passed a test.
Yeah.
They have not recovered from COVID-19.
Yeah, and I wanna just get on something too. We have several minutes before we close out. The NCAA, Big C, and this is for fields up at that school. They say a Buckeye is a nut, Ohio State. NCAA college football, more than 3,000 games have been canceled, Big C, or pushed back so far in Division 1, 2 and 3, and that's not counting junior colleges all over this great country. And Justin Fields, no matter how many signatures these white men send you out there to collect, the same way they had men out there collecting cotton and other things too. If they didn't collect enough cotton, you know they would beat the slaves. They would beat them. They get them with lashes on the back because they did not bring up enough cotton, or what they call now signatures. Make sense to you, Mr. Day and Fields? He didn't get enough signatures yet, Big C. If he's not dumb, then he'll realize he'll make money in the NFL. They ain't gonna do anything for you at Ohio State. They even willing to risk your health, Big C. So what could he learn and other players? 3,000 games canceled, and they got one black guy out there getting signatures so they can show that science is not real, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I don't know if it's a learning process for him. I mean, he's a young man who has his anxiety about playing. He transferred from the University of Georgia last year to get an opportunity to play. And he, found his stride at Ohio State, and he thinks that he has some momentum. As young people, you aspire to make the team. After you make the team, you want to be a starter. After you become a starter, you want to be all-league. After you're all-league, you want to be all-American. After you become an All-American, you want to be a number one draft pick. Those are all the things that he's aspired to be ever since he's left high school as the number one recruit quarterback in the country, Charlton. And he felt that his dreams were right there at his foot. And all of a sudden, someone else struck it down that he didn't have control of.
Yeah.
He felt that he had more power than what he thinks that he has when he left the University of Georgia in a transfer and petitioned the NCAA to play and got that approval.
Yeah.
So he got that approval, Charlton, and he thinks that he can do the same thing, that he can go out and get a petition signed by people on the street, and they're going to agree with him. He has to understand those people on the street that he is getting to sign his petition have no power. And so they're not the president, they're not the athletic director, they're not the head coach. Until those three individuals come out and say, we demand to play. And you also have to understand, Rutgers University, since they returned to campus, Charlton, has had 30 players test positive for COVID-19. They're part of the Big Ten.
Yeah.
So when you got all these players testing positive and they're saying this is not slowing down and we're not willing to pay the liability lawsuit that these players are going to bring upon us, we're canceling sports.
Yeah, and let's send this young black kid. You're not the guy at the back of the bus and the lowest on the you're not the last guy to make the team. You're going to play in the NFL. And they're able to tell you to do what science is saying not do, and that's going to cost you money. They love you so much, they're willing to put you out there and say, come on, black guy, get all your other black friends out there for us. I got to have that money. Big C, the Lightning, Tampa Bay Lightning in the NHL playoffs, they're doing their things up in Canada. They have a 3-1 commanding lead. Now they took over the Columbus Blue Jackets with a 2-1 win. And so you have in the Canadian, in Canada, where they're control the virus more so than in the United States. NHL hockey, they're still going strong with NHL hockey, so we wish them nothing but the best. I know in NBA basketball, I think there's a good boy that dropped 51 points. I can't remember his name for the life of me right now. But NBA basketball, people say, oh, the ratings are down. People are out of work. People are looking for work. People don't have food on the table. The last thing they can do is sit around the TV and watch a guy drop 51 points and make $20 million a year. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it was actually Donovan Mitchell, and he dropped 57 points.
57.
Yes, the numbers are down in the NBA because it's more like an NCAA tournament, Charlton. When you look at these games, they were stacked on top of each other.
Yeah.
When you get too much of one thing at one time, it no longer has the prestige or the desire to have. When things are stretched out and you have to sit there and wait on it to come by with anticipation, then you sit there and you're more zealous about going to watch.
Yep.
The NBA ratings are down, just like in every sport. Baseball ratings are down. NHL ratings are down.
Employment's down. Yeah.
When you have people that are depressed and people say, oh, when sports come back, everything will come back to normal. Hell no. When you're sitting around and you're hungry, the last thing that you're going to worry about is what time the game is kicking off. When you had an eviction notice on your door, the last thing you can worry about is what time is tip-off. So as people think that sports is a great communicator and it brings everybody back together, it may bring you back together, Charlton, when you're financially stable. But when you're not financially stable, you're looking for the next dollar that you can put in your pocket.
Yeah, it is always true. It's all fair and love and war. Democratic National Convention tonight. I can't wait to, I recorded it, Big C. Michelle Obama, former First Lady Michelle Obama speaking tonight, Senator Bernie Sanders, Andrew Cuomo. There's a lot of people out there going to be on the stage. People do what you want to stay informed with politics. We got to know what's important and what's going on in life. Big C, it's 130 degrees in Death Valley. That's hot. I hope they can get some ceiling fans or some ice. Back in the day, there's a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, as all these sports reporters constantly talk about what the players' demands are about playing, I want to hear them bring on some of these coaches where they've canceled the conference play, Charlton, in football, and see what these coaches say about it. Are they going to be as empty-minded as a lot of these athletes have been, Charlton? I also want to thank our frontline healthcare workers, our nurses, doctors, and first responders for doing the admirable job that you do in America every day. Stay strong, stay safe.
Stay strong and stay safe. And please, turn on the air conditioner. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow us that's like anywhere in the world you can follow Big C Sports. Really appreciate that. And as we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for racism or domestic violence. If you know any man, woman, or child going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and ask for help, because no man, woman, or child should ever have to deal with that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.